We need to somehow get a couple of these chairs like through that way into the corner. Okay. Chairs that fit straight back here too. Away when we came in, it was like there was a party here. Not perfect place for a party, right, guys? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I think I'm gonna need more chairs. Okay. So apparently there was something like some kind of game on last night. Anyone watch that?
The Super Bowl?
Who won? Yeah. Who won?
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay,
About
me
the Super Bowl,
either. Did anyone? Or the Rams? I was kind of on Team Bengals just because I like cats, but that's okay. All right, is Yuki here? Yuki? Hi, I wanted to give you the book for your presentation because it just came in the mail to me. So just get this back to me whenever you're done with your presentation. Hot off the press, too. Angela Davis just published that. Hi. Aw, you were moved. I was doing the seating chart, and now the seating chart is totally not going to be. But I know who a couple of you are now, so I need to learn a couple more names today. Sirat. Okay. We have two Jackies. Two Jackies, raise hands. Okay, all right. So now now I know your names. That's good. Another name. Okay. Well, I made you platonic, aromantic Valentines. Actually, they're from Gloria, Anzaldua. And they're part of our activity today. But I also brought a couple of chocolates. Now, I wasn't sure because I'm like, okay, we don't want to all be reaching in and touching it. So, but then we're all going to be touching this anyway. So I wasn't sure, right? If you want chocolate and you're not worried about other people, like reaching in and grabbing one, then they're going to be up here for you, okay? When you come up to get these, but we're not doing these right away. Just gonna put them up for now. And if you want to use this, you may do so. So it's time. We are going to start out by talking about Patricia Hill Collins, Learning from the Outsider Within, the Sociological Significance of Black Feminist Thought. It's really nice that we were able to have Christy give us, share with us Patricia Hill Collins' article on self-definition, because that's one component, but not all the components of this article. And I wanted to start out by asking you a question, because Lugones and Spellman already took us into this concept of an insider and outsider. And if you remember, Lugones and Spellman were telling us that it's actually good to recognize insidership and outsidership because it operates anyway. And that white communities need to recognize when they are outsiders to other communities that they have often come into in sort of a power-based way. But what I wanted to ask you, sorry, we need another. There's one over here in the corner. We're gonna have to maybe have you. Oh, there is. Okay. I think we should be like, we're full. We're full. We have one more seat, and that could possibly be used if we had to. All right. So what I want you to just sort of think about for a moment and try to respond to is, what is different? What do you see as the similarities or differences between the argument Lugones and Spellman make about insiders and outsiders as a tool, as a feminist methodological, theoretical tool for ways to relate that are in the realm of friendship between communities versus, or in comparison with, the concept of Patricia Hill Collins, the outsider within, and that positionality? How are these approaches to this, what seems on the surface as a similar or the same concept? How is it different? Just think about that for a minute. You don't have to write, you can write if you want, but I do want you to be able to try to respond. And if you have something in the article to point to in responding as an example, that's fine as well. That would be helpful. Kira, I know your name now. Another one. Good. See. Haley in the hat. Okay. Hi. I know, in fact, everything got disrupted today. The seating chart is now broken. The seating chart, it was, in fact, we had a lot of people missing, and I was trying to make myself a seating chart, and then I had it where your names were all backward to me. And I'm like, oh, when I look at this, I'm gonna be, so I like wrote your names next to your names the other way around. And then we come in today and like everything was in disarray. So maybe when we come in on Wednesday, we can try a seating chart again and then try to stay in that area just for until I learn names better. Okay. All right, just a quick question. I wanted, out of curiosity, I kind of want to know which theorists are speaking to you most of all, or styles, because we have two very different styles and presentations of feminist theory today with Gloria Anzaldua's work and Patricia Hill Collins. How many of you felt like Patricia Hill Collins' work spoke more to you, or style, maybe perhaps I could say it? Okay, okay. How many of you felt that Gloria Anzaldua's style speaks more to you? Okay, so a few on each side of it. When I think of sort of my idea of high theory, I think of Anzaldua, but I also find it accessible in a way because it's poetic. Patricia Hill Collins is coming out of a sociological perspective. So the way that it's presented and the purpose of it and the style of it all reflect those disciplinary values from that field. So that's something that we are going to want to kind of think about in terms of what is the point of this theory, right? What is it meant to do? Which is another question that I want to ask you. So let's start with this little transition moment between Lugones and Spellman's work and Hill Collins's work. What do you think? What do you see as the differences, and how is this, the outsider within, kind of being framed differently and uniquely from the insider-outsider concept? Yeah, hey.
The outsider in this context is still seen by the larger whole as part of. So it's literally, as Miles says, an outsider inside the structure.
Okay, so if you even just kind of picture a visual of what this is saying, insider and outsider might picture like two separate worlds, if we'd like think of them as two separate places, versus an insider within a space. So yeah, that's a nice way of kind of putting it in a visual. What else? What else conceptually? Yes, yes. Wait, remind me of your name. Let's do this.
Emily.
Emily. I have Emma. Where's Emma? Emma. I know, with the hat and the mask and everything. I'm like, Emma, I'm gonna have trouble with that, but we'll get to know each other. Emma and Emily. Okay.
I feel like Patricia Hill Collins goes a little more into how there could be outsiders even within the same group. Like she talked about how Black women have also have completely different experiences within like being Black women.
One of the things that you're pointing to, and that Hayes was also starting to move towards, is the difference in the way that power is operating in the relationship, right? Conceptually. So the insider-outsider concept is a concept that is made and meant to protect communities that are being oppressed, right? Because of power differentials and supremacy attitudes. So it's a protection to keep out, to sort of keep at a distance a community that sees itself as supreme over or having power over, right? So power in that situation is working differently than in the outsider within, where if we go to our beginning of where Patricia Hill Collins sort of starts this, she writes, Afro-American women have long been privy to some of the most intimate secrets of white society. Countless numbers of Black women have ridden buses to their white families, in quotes, where they not only cooked, cleaned, and executed other domestic duties, but where they also nurtured their other children, shrewdly offered guidance to their employers, and frequently became honorary members of white families. So we're talking about a context here that is power-based, that has roots in slavery, right? And so the concept of the outsider within is a concept meant to recognize agency within a system of power. The insider-outsider is creating agency through separation. The outsider within is sort of recognizing a power position in a marginalized position. Does that make sense? Okay, other thoughts on this question? Or other examples that you would like to point to? So what about this concept of the outsider within? What is it? And what does it do, right? Because Patricia Hill Collins, like all of our feminist theorists, is coming up with this concept. She wants us to walk away with the outsider within in our heads, right? It's going to do something. What is it meant to do and what is it? Yeah.
I feel like she was a line. It says, as outsiders within, Black feminist scholars may be one of the many distinct groups of marginal intellectuals whose standpoints promise to enrich contemporary sociological discourse. So like the outsider within is kind of bringing a different point of view to a topic. So it's important to listen to those voices. And I think that's what she's trying to get across.
Right. That's a great point. And it also brings us to this little concept here called standpoint theory. And standpoint theory is a form of feminist theory that she sort of unpacks in this article. You're getting to see what it looks like on the page. It's looking at a unique positionality. And that's why I brought this over here and put this on the board, because you're looking at the roots of the concept of intersectionality that we're going to be unpacking a little bit more, and that we visited in Crenshaw's work during the presentation last week. So Bell Hooks is also part of this concept of intersectionality, and she actually references Bell Hooks at the beginning of her work. That's on page 515. It's at the top of the page. And let me find where that begins. Finally, Black feminist critic Bell Hooks captures the unique standpoint that the outsider within status can generate. In describing her small town Kentucky childhood, she notes, living as we did on the edge, we developed a particular way of seeing reality. We looked both from the outside and in, from the inside out. We understood both. So again, roots of this concept of intersectionality are right there in Bell Hooks' work. Patricia Hill Collins is building on this and using Bell Hooks' ideas and saying, hey, in my field of sociology, I want to introduce this concept of a unique standpoint and talk about the benefits of that unique standpoint. Any other benefits that she talks about of this positionality is actually right on this page. Now, she refers to sociological work, other writers' work. So she's drawing from different fields. She's drawing from feminist theory through Bell Hooks, and then she's drawing from the academic field of sociology in order to create this theory. Oh, that's okay. It's okay.
I don't know why.
It's Valentine's, you know, we're in good spirits here. We need a little music. Yeah, Jackie.
I feel like what she takes into account is like differences in like she takes experience as a way of knowing, because even though like one's emotion is not necessarily the most rational way of thinking, but still like it's how one person is feeling in that moment. And so she talks about like the definition of objectivity, and I thought it got me thinking about like even though like it's very subjective in a way, but you can't really just say someone's experience is wrong because you don't know it.
That's great. So she's doing something within her field too. So in addition, she's writing feminist theory and contributing to that thought. She's also contributing to sociological thought invalidating experiences as knowledge or as forms of knowledge. That's key. And that's key in what we read in Bell Hook's work last week. So again, you're sort of getting a little bit of how these speakers are speaking with each other and how it's going to relate when we come to more contemporary things. You're going to see that validation of experience as knowledge within feminist theory. Now, why do we need to validate experience as knowledge? What are the stakes of doing that? Yeah, Jackie.
Because especially when people who come from a marginalized community, they are technically what in the power system, they are the outsiders. And so the best way to know about one's oppression is to listen to the people who are the ones who are oppressed.
Excellent point. Other thoughts on why this is so crucial? Because there are some, even you mentioned it in your first comment, where it's like, oh, it might not be so objective, right? There are going to be some people that see this form of theory and this form of knowledge and the subjectivity that it forms as invalid, right? There are going to be people that sort of say, well, this is not quantifiable, or, you know, it sort of stands outside. However, these group of thinkers are coming together and they're like fighting for this. And they're saying, no, it matters. Why else does it matter? How could we argue that this is really a form of knowledge? Yeah, sorry, I'm going to go to someone else and then I'll come back to you. Emily.
Yeah, I feel like it relates to the article, like academia accessibility being spoken for, like not everybody is able to get like their PhD, but they should still deserve to be heard and like validated with their experiences.
Okay, so it creates access and space for other voices as well. I saw your hand and then your hand and then we'll go to Jackie. Yes.
I feel like, you know, as we get older, like the more we experience, the more wise we get, you know, so I feel like any experience is beneficial, like to like us learning, you know, so I feel like that in itself is like concrete knowledge. Like if we just listen to other people's experiences, it happened, so it exists, you know.
Yeah, it's actually what you're pointing to is that it's part of history, right? But the issue is that often the forms of history and the experiences and the realities of histories of marginalized people don't get told or they get erased, right? So by having more access, by tuning into the wisdom of people's lived experiences, we're actually gathering knowledge. We're actually gathering history. Were you going to say something related to that, Jackie?
Yeah, sort of. I was trying to like relate feminist theory to, well, like in general, this theory to like philosophy.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Because philosophy is one of the more like accepted forms of thinking, because very famous white male philosophers, and so like if you know that form of thinking is also technically subjective, but it was more widely accepted by more people. The only difference there is because there were white men who thought of this stuff, as to like people who are oppressed, who are thinking about this stuff.
Okay, so we get this sort of body of thought, what you're calling philosophies, what you're sort of associating with a white man's legacy, and you get these bodies of thought that are based on and that came out of power, relationships that already existed, right? So here's what knowledge is, and here are the contours of knowledge, and here are the limits of knowledge, but we can go through, we can explore them from this positionality, right? So it's actually acknowledging the standpoint in relation. It makes us think about all those other standpoints, like where what you're talking about philosophy comes from. And it is a philosophy. It sort of contributes its own way. And I think maybe with Gloria Anzaldua's work, we can sort of get a little bit more feeling of a philosophy in terms of the language and style, because philosophy can have sort of those poetic elements, whereas this might feel a little bit more practical, and the examples that are given are practical. So I just want to talk about these benefits of positionality that she lists that come from Simmel's 1921, okay, drawing back into an early sociological work, concepts. He calls this stranger. So, okay, this essay that she's referring to, the significance of what he called the stranger offers a helpful starting point for understanding the largely unexplored area of Black female outsidership within status. She's identifying a new way of thinking about this, because a lot of times we would maybe just say outsiders, right? And she's like, oh, no, Black women in this context, they're outsiders within it. And it's actually really brilliant that she identifies this positionality within an oppressive system. And it has its empowering elements. But the benefits here, which she comes from a sociological standpoint, is some of the potential benefits are the definition of objectivity as a peculiar composition of nearness and remoteness, concern and indifference. The tendency for people to confide in a stranger in ways they never would with each other. The ability of the stranger to see patterns that may be more difficult for those immersed in the situation to see. And I think that third point is something that we need to add to the validation of an outsider within standpoint. Because seeing patterns that others can't see because of their positionality, that's sort of like, that comes into what becomes Crenshaw's intersectionality. And it also allows for a person to identify problems and to name them. Would that have to do with power, in relation to that positionality? Now, the next page of this essay is going to connect with these key themes in Black feminist thought. We talked about self-definition, thanks to Christy, in the presentation that we had last week. But then there's self-valuation. So I that kind of builds on it and expands on it. Does anyone want to say anything about these concepts that maybe you didn't get to say last Friday? How are these helpful? These are Black feminist thought concepts. These are feminist theoretical concepts. What does it do? What is, how are self-valuation and self-definition different, according to Patricia Hill Collins? I mean, you could just think about these concepts on your own for a second here, right? You read the article. When we think of self-definition, we've already sort of unpacked it last week, but it's like, defining the self sort of, but it's specifically within a cultural context. That's what she's doing with the concept. Self-valuation on 517, she says at the top of the page, stresses the content of Black women's self-definitions, namely replacing externally driven images with authentic Black female images. So again, I always like to point to, and I like to talk about what the function of these things are, what they can do. So we have the concept of self-valuation, and then she tells us right in this passage why it's important, because it is going to combat negative, stereotyped images that are harmful, that are power-based, that are going to continue to play out and create sort of oppressive conditions, right? It does work. It does work, and it has that sort of purpose. On page 518, at the middle of the page, she writes, Black women's insistence on self-definition, self-valuation, and the necessity for a Black female-centered analysis is significant for two reasons. First, defining and valuing one's consciousness of one's own self-defined standpoint in the face of images that foster a self-definition as the objectified other is an important way of resisting the dehumanization essential to systems of domination. So right there, she tells us what it's going to do, but she also kind of goes back and contextualizes the outsider within concept within Black feminist thought in doing this. So both of those things are really important. At the bottom of the page, she says a second reason that Black female self-definition and self-valuation are significant concerns their value in allowing Afro-American women to reject internalized psychological oppression. So let's think about that. What does it mean to reject internalized psychological oppression? How do we actually do that, right? Like we write articles like this, we form communities around ideas, but what does it look like? Because in coming up with this theory of Black feminist thought, if you follow this theory, there might be benefits to you. Even if if your marginalization has to do with being something else, being gay in my case, right? So what is it to reject internalized psychological oppression? Is that something that is easy to do? What does that actually look like on the ground in our lives? Jackie,
Would that be desensitization?
I'm not sure. What do you mean by desensitization?
Like you just become so used to the trauma and the you recognize the power system that you're in, and it's not even a matter of like being offended or anything. It's almost just like you're just tired and like
I think you're doing a great job of describing it. Okay, let's talk about this. This is something that Kevin brought up. Kevin's not with us today. But internalized depression, it comes in the form of desensitization. What else? How else do people experience internalized depression? The psychological effects of it. Yeah.
Is it like if someone, kept telling you how stupid you are and you start to believe that
Okay.
that's true?
Beliefs form around it. What else? Yes.
Maybe like settling in their life because people think that there's an opportunity to do better.
So accepting unfair conditions, accepting cruelty, accepting poor treatment. Anything else? Yeah.
Low self-esteem and low self-worth.
Absolutely. Anything else you can think of? For the forms, manifestations of internalized depression? Yeah, Haley.
I feel like I was reading a different reading in a different class,
Mhm.
and we saw him kind of experience this internalized depression, and he almost, his father was somebody who stood out, and he almost hated his dad for standing out. So he kind of like went into that mold and didn't understand why somebody of his own culture would want to stand out from the oppression.
So maybe judgment or hatred of one's own self and family. Yeah, any other examples that you can think of in the media or in literature or somewhere else in some other class where you've had seen an example of this concept of internalized oppression? Yeah, how?
In my little gender relations class, we were talking about this concept of liminality, which came up in the reading that I did the presentation on. It is basically the concept of like moving through two positions. So like a lot of when you internalize your oppression, you always like trying to explain it to other people without really understanding without being in it. So it's like that like concept of being like in between these spaces.
Which actually connects amazingly with Gloria Anzaldua's work, which is all about that in between spaces concept. So you can see how these ideas sort of move through our work and are connected in sort of moving ways. So liminality, I think also disconnection from community. Anything else? So when we think about internalized depression, it's like this hard thing to sort of articulate, right? We see sometimes the effects of it and people judge the effects of it without sort of recognizing what is actually happening. But studying feminist theory, the purpose of it, we can see in this article, is to sort of give us tools, right? Give us tools to work against internalized depression or to work with it for the benefit of the people who experience it, right? Naming it, recognizing it, and then we have, various theories that sort of interact with it because it obviously is a problem. It's like the underlayer of oppression on the surface, right? All these forms and violences and things that happen on the surface. But then if communities become internally oppressed, and it is on a mind-body level, right? Which is why I always want to go back to our experiences, our minds and our bodies. It's part of the theory, but then what do we do? Because then we're trying to solve problems, but we have these other layers we have to deal with too. So we can't just say, well, we're just going to change the laws and that solves everything. And we're going to make new policies and that solves everything. We're not going to allow this behavior. But then we still have things working under the surface that hurt us, right? Okay, so because we're getting like more than halfway through, I want to do our Valentine activity with Gloria and Anzaldua. So I want you to come up, pick your little Valentine. They are quotes. Most of them are from the ones you had on the board, and then a bunch of others that I found as well. I think there were only a couple that I couldn't read when I was like on my phone and I was trying to like make it bigger. So come and pick out one, and also please feel free to have some chocolate from Watson's if you would like. Okay, and then I'll tell you what we're gonna do. You're welcome to look at them and choose, or you just gonna be totally random and you're stuck with it. These chocolates are fine chocolates. You should take one if you like chocolate. You can eat it later if you want. To own the fact. Yeah, if my handwriting is indecipherable, which it very well could be, I will come and help you. Okay, our extra Valentines. Aw. Yeah, please, these are from Watson's and it's like my favorite. Although I'm a milk chocolate person, these are here for you. Hopefully have some more if you want. Okay, so our activity with a partner. Okay, I want you to read your Valentines. I want you to kind of think about them together. I want you to choose one that you're going to focus on, right? That gives you a little bit of leeway if one is a little bit more difficult for you. Obviously, I want you to take these home with you, but you can choose one to focus on together. And I want you to answer these questions, and then we're going to sort of share, okay? This is our way of getting into the material. There is so much here. There is so much here that is important and complicated and sometimes challenging in La Conciencia de la Mestiza. I had to practice that, okay? It's towards a new consciousness. So I want you to together answer these questions. One, what does the passage mean to you? Like, what does it mean in the context of feminist theory? Okay, they might be two separate things, like, okay, just read this and it means this to me. Start there. Okay, let me think about the ideas we've been talking about. What does it mean in that context? That's the second kind of component of that question. The second question is, what can you relate it to? What examples of the concept come to mind from your own life and experiences? And I actually am going to add another question to this. What does or can it do? What is it doing, right? What is it contributing to making change or to adding something different? So you're going to work together on this. I want you to sort of engage with the text. Now, it might be a little hard to find it. You know how I had you put all those concepts on the board? When I got home and I was like looking at them, I'm like, oh, there's no page numbers. I didn't tell them to. So it was like pedagogical mistake there because I was like, I can't find all these quotes that they wanted. So I ended up just writing all these quotes. You don't need to find it on the page. You can just respond to it yourself and work with the ideas themselves. But if you want to do a little bit of a search for it, you can do that too. Okay. And I'm here, but I want you to take some time to answer these questions, and then we're going to share. You have to talk to each other. So just work with whoever is next to you, just one partner for each. And if we need a group of three, we'll have a group of three. What's your name? Callie, with a C. Callie, with a Kelly with a C. Okay. A sieve. You know what a sieve is? Like if you put flour, it's like a metal thing with holes in it. You know, you sift flour.
Yeah.
And like it stops like if you want to put tomatoes through it, the chunks are gonna stop, but the juice will flow through it. But if that's what it started, you know, hey, there's a couple others here. But this one, two of them are in Spanish.
I'm down to go with yours, actually.
Then, I'm just practicing names here. This is my chance.
Mine's on page 1 or 2. I found it in the middle of the page.
No, I'm ready.
It feels like it's hard to looking at the context of the passage, they're more yeah, what needs to be is essentially to in order to solve a problem that like haunting me is the point to first look at myself and see what's wrong. Oh, it was on the, it's actually on the board. I think the overall message is still the same, even in terms of feminist theory. Instead, it would just be more word this specifically for feminist theory. Like going back to the thing, what's it called? It has feminist theory. It'd be more like to understand why there's this outsider and insider relationship between different races, different genders, different sexes. We must first locate why there is such differentiation in discourse between the sexes.
Hey, how's it going? Do you need just one more minute?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh my gosh, I had it with me all weekend. I saved it for your friends to do. You must have come, because I stayed here an hour after class. I had a meeting online. But I was like, I have to take it with me rather than have someone like it on the radio. I mean, I don't think someone would take it, but just in case. You're reunited. Okay, so wherever you're at, if you didn't answer one of the questions, it's okay. Just share what you did talk about. That's all we're doing here. Share your quote that you chose together. So we're not going to share both. Share the one you chose and then just tell us what you talked about, essentially. I guess we'll start over here because I probably start over there a lot. So hi. Share your quote with us, and I don't know if one person or both, three wants to talk.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jackie. This is Kelly, and this is Sarai. Our quote is: "The answer to the problem lies in healing the split that originates in the very foundation of our lives." Gloria, page 102. Oh, sorry, I misread that part. But
You got the quote. Okay,
Yeah,
what
I
did you
read the
talk
quote.
about?
So we talked about how the quote seems very, it seems like a very simple message, right? In order to solve a problem, we must first see what's the root of it. Where did it come from? What's causing it? And what is it affecting? But then we thought in terms of feminist theory, how does the meaning sort of change, or rather, how does it elevate? And generally, what we came to think of is that in terms of feminist theory, this quote is telling us that in order to understand and find a solution to this difference between outsider and insider relationship, we must first understand why there is such discourse between different races, genders, and cultures.
Okay, anyone want to add anything before I talk about that just for a second? Okay, so Gloria Anzaldua conceptualizes a new framework for dealing with the problems of society that Jackie was just talking about, okay? So yes, finding the root of the problem is part of what Anzaldua encourages us to do, but also recognizing knowledge in this space of this mestiza consciousness, this concept of a place in between. So this is where it gets philosophical. This is where it gets really theoretical, in that it relates on the ground to identities and lives, and Anzaldua gives us examples of that. But then as a concept, there's sort of the conceptual part that floats above it, which sort of says, what is an in-between space? Now, technically, we can think about this as the Mexican-United States border. But Anzaldua is collapsing that border and saying that some of us live within that border. We are not on one side or another. We're in that liminal space of being in between. And it is from that liminal space that we have a unique knowledge and a unique wisdom to give, right? So it does relate to Patricia Hill Collins' concept that we've been talking about very well. Thank you. Okay, over to you.
I'm Sally and I'm partners with Bez, and we chose they'd like to think I have melted in the pot, but I haven't. We haven't. And we really talked about how it kind of relates to intersectionality and how instead of a melting pot, it should be a mosaic of like different cultures and like absolute like recognizing other cultures and not drowning them out and assimilating.
A mosaic versus a melting pot. That's really nice. Really well said. Yes, thank you. I just want to try to get through as many of you as we can. Otherwise, I could just sit and talk to each of you about each of what you said, but we would be here for another hour. Okay, hi.
Hi. So we need you to own the fact that you looked upon us as less than human, that you stole our lands, our personhood, our self-respect. So you connected this to the idea that this message was, calling out white audiences to recognize what they did, how they upheld the historical impact of their ancestors, connecting it to intersectionality, and that white audiences need to start adapting more of a nuanced, intersectional, interlocking perspective instead of just sticking to this radical girl boss white feminism.
And I don't know who had the quote or where it is off the top of my head, but this sort of leads to Anzaldua's intervention to say, well, what do we solve the problem of this separateness, right? And what do we solve the problems of being in a position where you are in between communities and in between identities always, and you're not fixed in one or another. You're not outside or inside, or you're shifting between. And that's to sort of return to the wisdom, like I said, of that. But it's also to call others to say, actually, from being in this position, in this liminal space, in this in-betweenness, the knowledge that is here is a knowledge you should follow. This is a new way of thinking that society should use to solve these problems, because we're not separate, we're together. So use the theory, the mestiza consciousness, as a new theory for humanity and the way that we should live in the world. Does that make sense? Okay, I think we can get one or two more groups in. Thank you. Yeah.
So our quote was, as a lesbian, I have no race. My own people display me, but I am all races because there's the queer of me in all races. So we saw connections with intersectionality a lot, in that not only has she been displaced by her own race, her own queer community, probably womanhood as well, but she's creating her own community of other marginalized people. So she doesn't care that she's defying the typical cultural roles of each community, because it has a lot to do with self-valuation and creating her own.
Awesome. Yeah. So here's another sort of intervention that I'm just writing down what you said and spoke to that Anzaldua does. Taking displacement and unbelonging and liminality and sort of moving through that and saying that actually being in this position leads to creation, right? It leads to, and in some of the poetic moments of the chapter, where there's the mortal and the pestle, right? That's the creation process. It leads to belonging, it leads to blending. So again, there's the theoretical concept there that we can think about. I want you to keep these with you, because maybe this is the one that's going to really speak to you all semester. And when you come to the end of the semester and you're doing some creative project, you're going to say, oh, remember Anzaldua's idea of liminality as the space for a new theory for how the world can work in a better way? I'm going to use that in when I'm trying to solve the problem I'm trying to solve, or whatever I'm trying to do in my own work. Okay, one more group. Who are you with?
Oh,
You were by yourself? Okay, do you want to share?
the mentor was ignorant, but people of faith prejudice, and this is when people is because they talked about similar to what she said, where white communities purposely remain ignorant to their issues that don't deal with them, and how they're unconsciously hurting communities by reflect on your role in society, not creating.
I love that idea that reflection is sort of a methodology, that it can help us to be better. Okay, so just keep your Valentines, bring them back, because I do want to have everyone share at the beginning of class. But we are moving on Wednesday. We're moving on to talk about feminist theory, economy, labor, and I don't like that word. I am taking Max and Drukey's article, Clearing Social Reproduction, off of the reading list. We don't have time. We're never going to get to it Wednesday. We have presentation Friday. So you're only reading Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis and The Case for Filth by Stephen Marks, okay? Please come and take more chocolate if you liked it. If you didn't try it and you want to try it, that chocolate is here for you, and have a very happy Valentine's Day. Okay. Okay, then it's probably in there, and it's probably in my inbox. For some reason, I just did not see it. I will look. Give me your name now. I'm gonna look. You're my Emily. Oh, another Emily. Okay, I will take care of it. Yeah, if I can't find it, I'll email you. Okay. All right. Okay, it's that.
So,
You weren't here for an assignment? Because you hadn't joined yet? You can do it. What I will say is read bell hooks. Oh, there's an online lecture I did on YouTube. So if you watch that, it tells you what to do. I'll give you the credit for it. So you have to go on UB Learn and then like look through my old announcements and you'll find the link to the new video. It's a written assignment. It's like a paragraph long. So it's just an class thing. But you gotta watch the video to do it. Okay? Did you send it in the weekend? I didn't see it yet. Okay, remind me what's going on. Okay.
So I'm the last one.
Oh, what do you think of it? Yay! Okay.
So in my email, I wanted to ask, I have this picture of my friend putting it tattoo, and I also have another one. And I was wondering if you thought they were inappropriate for presentation.
No, not at all. You're totally, that's awesome. All right, love it.
And then I also, like in the beginning of the presentation, I discussed like the meaning of certain tattoos.
Okay.
I want to like go around to self-definition. And
Yeah, writing on the body, right? Not just writing in the in the traditional text, but the body is text.
So there's like, this is a discussion. Okay. I wanted to put this trigger warning in the beginning to make sure.
Yeah, so when you present it, I should have talked a little bit about trigger warnings to everyone. What we're gonna do from now on, if there is a trigger warning, you can, instead of just saying, hey, there's triggers and let's go, like, just say if you need to step outside, it's totally okay, right? And then give someone a moment to leave the class, because I noticed that when we did it last time, it was like, trigger warning here, boom, and then it was already there. So if you just take a moment to let people leave if they need to.
All right. And then the last thing I talked about my email was, I was hoping I could present first,
Okay.
because I want to do like a post-it thing about, I mean, I was gonna do a playlist by my hair out.
I love that.
But I think I'm gonna change it to, write something that you would think defines yourself.
Okay, it sounds amazing and I'm super excited. Yay! Okay, hi.
I just wanted to ask, what was the article that we wanted to read?
Oh, for Wednesday? I got my little thing here. Okay, so you're reading an article by Angela Davis, Women, Race, and Class. It's up on UB Learn, and then an article, The Case for Filth, and there's a link to it.
Also, the first 2 weeks.
Just the first two, taking out the third reading, because we're just not gonna have time to discuss it, okay? All right, see you later.